Alright, so this Saturday, November 11th, we have UFC Fight Night 120. It's going to be headlined by Dustin, Poirier, and Anthony Showtime Pettis. Now, I'm pretty stoked because this is the same day as my birthday. And it's also Veterans Day, so a big shout out to all the veterans out there. Just want to say thank you for what you've done for our country, defending our rights and freedoms. So hopefully we get to see some good fights. I think this is a pretty good Fox card. I wouldn't say it's one of the best, but there definitely are some entertaining matchups on this card. Like always, this is a prediction video for only the main card fights. If you want to see the predictions or my picks for the entire card, make sure to look in the description down below, and all my fight picks will be down there. And I'm also going to start doing my safest picks, so make sure to look in the description and check those out. But without further ado, let's get right into it. Now, for the first fight on the main card, we have a lightweight bout, I should say, between Joe Lauzon and Clay the Carpenter Guida. Now, this is definitely going to be a scrap. These two guys are seasoned veterans. They both had 20-plus fights in the UFC. Now, albeit, right off the bat, I'm going to say none of these guys, or neither of these guys, I should say, are championship contenders, and that's obvious. Both these guys are over 30. But it's going to be an entertaining matchup because both of these guys are known for pressing forward. They are both known for putting on entertaining fights. If you've seen Clay Guida with the Diego Sanchez fight, that's one of the best fights that I have ever seen personally. And then you got Joe Lauzon. I believe he's tied for the record for winning the most post-fight award bonuses. Now, you got two guys, right, that like to come forward, like to press the action, and always put on entertaining fights. And on one hand, you got Clay Guida, who had been out of the UFC for quite some time. I believe his last fight against Eric Koch was his first fight in over a year. Now, he looked really good in that fight. Koch, as we all know, is a young up-and-coming talent, a really, really good striker, and has all the tools to be really successful in the lightweight division. And Clay Guida was in there, right, and he was poised. His boxing looks so much better. He's not as wild as he was before. He's not just throwing flurries of combinations, not knowing where he's throwing the punches or where he's trying to hit. But he looked very poised. He was actually the one that landed a few overhand rights to the chin of Koch and hurt him a couple times. Eventually, he was able to get the fight to the ground, use his superior wrestling, and just dominated Koch. You know, he used his wrestling to really neutralize all of Koch's strengths, which are on the feet, which are through his kicks and his punches, right, his boxing abilities. So with that being said, that was a really good win for Clay Guida. And on top of that, he has tremendous heart. He has a really good chin, albeit he's been finished a couple of times by better fighters, but he always comes forward. He has one of the best gas tanks that I have ever seen. He can be busted up, he can be bloodied up, and in the third round, he'll still be moving around as if it's the beginning of the fight. So he's always in tremendous shape. Now, Joe Lauzon is just as tough. I mean, this guy has also been in his fair share of wars. Now, Lauzon is a pretty good boxer. He's pretty good in the clinch. He likes to utilize knees to the body, and his ground game, his jiu-jitsu is sickening. He has ridiculously good jiu-jitsu, even though he's only ranked a purple belt, but he is extremely talented on the mat. He has a professional record of 27 wins and 14 losses, and 17 of his wins have come via submission, so he definitely knows how to finish fights on the ground. I believe 7 of his wins come by knockout, so he has pretty decent power in his punches, pretty good boxing, but the ground is where he makes his money. Now, both these guys are going to put on a good fight. This is going to be a good fight. I think it's going to be a war. It has all the makings to be a war, but I think that Joe Lauzon is the better overall fighter. I think he's been more active. Like I said, Clay Guida's last fight was his first fight in over a year, and in that year, Joe Lauzon had already taken 3 fights, so he's been much more active, and I think he's just a better fighter, especially on the feet and especially on the ground. Now, I do think it's going to be an exciting first round. I think both these guys are going to come out right off the bat and just swing for the fences. I think they're going to hurt each other. Now, in the second round, I think that somewhere along the lines, Lauzon will engage in the clinch with Clay Guida, land a few knees to the body, hurt Guida, get the fight to the ground, and then submit him. Because if I remember correctly, I believe Clay Guida's been submitted 9 times throughout the entirety of his career, and I see things going down no different in this fight. I think Joe Lauzon is just a better overall fighter, as I've said earlier. I think he's going to come away with a second round submission victory. Now, next up, we have a bantamweight bout between the 4th ranked bantamweight in the world, Raphael Assuncao, and the 13th ranked bantamweight in the world in Matthew Lopez. Now, Assuncao is one of the better bantamweights in the world. He's extremely experienced. You know, he stepped inside the octagon with guys like Marlon Moraes, TJ Dillashaw, And he also has some good wins over guys like Brian Caraway, Johnny Eduardo, and Pedro Munoz. So he definitely has been in there with some stiff competition. Now, he's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Now, as a matter of fact, he currently has a professional record of 25 wins and only 5 losses. 10 of those wins come by submission. So he definitely knows how to get the job done on the ground. He knows how to finish fights. And in his last fight against Marlon Moraes, who is a really good striker, really good boxing, really strong leg kicks, he looked really good in that fight. I think it shows that his striking, especially his boxing, is a bit underrated and it's much improved. Assuncao landed a few combinations on Moraes. If I remember correctly, in the second round, it was Assuncao that landed a punch on Moraes and it hurt him. It stunned him badly, and it was a close fight. Albeit that was a close fight. They ended up giving Assuncao the split decision victory. I couldn't complain. It was a good performance by both men. It was a really good fight. And now he's going up against a guy in Matthew Lopez that only has 3 fights in the UFC. He lost his UFC debut, albeit that fight was only on about, I think, 2 days notice or something like that. In his last fight against Johnny Eduardo, who was at the time ranked number 11 in the bantamweight division and is a really good striker, Lopez looked good. That was a good win for a young fighter like Lopez. Now, albeit Lopez striking looked way better than Matthew Lopez. He was landing kicks to the lead leg of Lopez, who leans heavily on that front leg. He was landing a couple of good combinations, good hand speed that we saw from Johnny Eduardo before Matthew Lopez was able to shoot for the takedown. And he said before the fight, if I get this fight to the ground, it's my fight to win, because Lopez is extremely confident in his ability to out-wrestle his opponent and finish the fight and be a ground and pound. He is really good at wrestling, and in that fight, eventually, he got the fight to the ground, and he landed some mean ground and pound and finished Johnny Eduardo. I believe in the first round it was. So he's definitely talented. Now, I think at this point in his career, this is just a big step up in competition. I mean, you're going up against a guy like Raphael, who, as I said, has beaten some of the best bantamweights in the world. I don't see any way that Matthew Lopez can win this fight. Obviously, upsets are impossible, but I think that Raphael, even though he's a counterpuncher, he's going to come out a bit more aggressive in this fight, because he should know that Matthew Lopez's striking is not on par with his. I think he's going to attack the lead leg. I think he's going to take away Matthew Lopez's energy by punishing him to the leg and to the body, and I think it's going to go the distance, and I see Raphael being awarded the unanimous decision victory in a decisive victory for him. Now, next up, we have a middleweight bout between Nate the Great Marquardt and Cezar Ferreira. Now, Marquardt is another UFC vet that has tons of experience. Now, this is a guy that had previously competed for the championship at 185 pounds some time ago when he was smoked by Anderson Silva. But he's been around. I mean, he's a really good wrestler. He's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he has pretty good power in his punches. I believe 7 of his last 10 wins have come by knockout. And he's experienced, man. I mean, this is a guy that's had over 50 professional MMA fights throughout his career. So he definitely has seen it all. Now, he's currently on a bit of a slump. He's 3-5 in his last 8 fights. He's on a 2-fight losing streak to Sam Alvey and Vitor Belfort. So obviously he's not trying to climb the rankings. He's not trying to compete for championships. I think at this point he's just trying to figure out whether he still belongs in this sport. Now, he's going up against Cezar Ferreira, who is a capoeira master. His movement is really good, especially for his size. His arms are so long. His striking is really good, and he has power. Even though he only has 4 knockouts on his resume, he does have power. He showed that in the Hermansson fight. Hermansson moves so uniquely, right? He's so light on his feet, and his movement is really good. But in that fight, Ferreira was extremely well prepared for his movement, and he was tagging him up on the feet before he shot for a takedown, and he finished Hermansson via submission. Now, Ferreira's a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, so he's extremely skilled on the mat. Now, in his last fight against Theodoru, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, things didn't go his way. He didn't look as sharp in that fight, but he's still extremely skilled. So he's coming off that loss, and he's looking to regain the momentum that he had on his previous 3-fight win streak leading up to that fight. And I think he will. I think he will regain that momentum. I do see him beating Nate Marquardt. I just think that he is much more powerful. I think he's a much better overall striker, and I think that's how he's going to finish this fight. I think he's going to hurt Nate Marquardt in the first round with a couple combinations. I think Ferreira's also going to attack the legs early on, and then it's going to set up the high kicks, and I think he's just going to hurt Nate Marquardt at some point in the first round. Marquardt's going to turn into a panic wrestler, and then that's where I think that Ferreira is going to be able to, or have an opportunity to sink in a submission. So I'm going to give Ferreira the first round submission victory in this fight. Now, next up, we have a heavyweight bout between the fairly new Junior Albini and the seasoned vet in Andrei Arlovski. Now let me start off with Andrei Arlovski because I got to get this off my chest. Now I understand that Arlovski is an extremely athletic guy for his size, right? For the heavyweight division. I understand that he has good boxing, pretty good wrestling, good ground game. But I mean, this guy is the definition of what it means to have a glass chin. I mean, it just seems that every fight he's in, he's getting knocked out stiff. Now he has a record of 25-15, I believe it is, and 10 of his 15 losses come by knockout. He's currently on a 5-fight losing streak. 3 of those fights he's gotten knocked out. All 3 of those inside the first 2 rounds. He's gotten knocked out by Francis Ngannou, Stipe Miocic, and Alistair Overeem. Those are the 3 people that have knocked him out. Albeit they're phenomenal strikers. They have tremendous power in their punches. But nevertheless, he has a glass chin. He's always getting caught. And once he does get caught, even with a slightly clean punch, it's going to hurt him. Now, if you look at Albini, right, in his last fight against Timothy Johnson was ranked, and that was Albini's UFC debut. I thought that Timothy Johnson was just going to lay on top of him and just lay and pray his way to a unanimous decision victory. Now, he came out a little bit more aggressive than I expected him to. Early on, he threw a couple combinations at Junior Albini. Didn't catch him clean. But Albini capitalized. I mean, it shows. Albini really showed that he's extremely light on his feet for his size. He has good footwork, pretty good defense. His hands are fast. His kicks are fast. And he landed a couple combinations on Timothy Johnson. I believe it was a straight and an uppercut that hurt Timothy Johnson before the ref stepped in and finished the fight. So he did win his UFC debut in an impressive fashion. He does have power, but he also has the ground game to go with it. He has a record of 14-2. 6 of his wins come by knockout and another 6 by submission. So he definitely can finish fights in a variety of ways. Now, I like this kid a lot. I really do like Junior Albini. He's young. He's only 26 years of age, and he's only getting better. And plus, I'm a big fan of his story and what fighting in the UFC really means to him. And I think that he's going to go in there. He's going to be motivated to continue his climb up the rankings. And I think he will get the job done. Now, although Andrei Arlovski is not one of the hottest fighters right now, although he's not a championship contender, although he's not the biggest challenge in the heavyweight division, it's a big win for Junior Albini because Arlovski is a legend of the sport. So it's definitely going to boost up his confidence to get a win over a name like Andrei Arlovski. And I think he's just going to catch him. I think he's going to catch him just like Arlovski seems to get caught in every fight he's in. I think the same thing's going to happen in this fight. I think Albini will catch him early, perhaps with an overhand, perhaps with a hook, maybe an uppercut. And watch out for the high kick as well. But whatever he chooses to set up when it lands, it's going to put Arlovski on the mat. And it's going to give Albini the knockout victory. I do see Albini knocking Andrei Arlovski out in the first round. Now for the co-main event of the evening, we have a welterweight bout between Matt, the Immortal Brown, and Diego Sanchez. Now, both these guys are UFC veterans. It seems, as I've been saying that the entire video, there's a lot of UFC veterans, very experienced fighters on this card. Now, these 2 guys are extremely experienced as it gets. And, you know, we got Diego Sanchez, who's a former title competitor. He competed in the 155-pound division, fought BJ Penn for a world title, lost that fight. You know, he's competed with some of the best in the world. And he's also competed in different weight classes. He won the first season of The Ultimate Fighter in the middleweight division. He's competed at 170 pounds. He's also competed at lightweight, as I mentioned earlier. So he's bounced around. And then you've got Matt Brown, you know, who's competed with Donald Cerrone, Robbie Lawler, Johnny Hendricks, you know, some of the top competition or some of the top fighters in the 175-pound division. Now, this is going to be a scrap. This is going to be a war. I could talk about the fact that Diego Sanchez is extremely aggressive, has really good boxing. I could also talk about Matt Brown striking and how good it is. I can talk about the fact that both these gentlemen are really strong grapplers. I can also talk about the fact that both these guys are washed up. They're past their primes. But none of this matters. This isn't a fight that's going to involve rankings. It's not a #1 contender fight. Obviously, it's not a championship bout. But what this is an old-fashioned dogfight. This is going to be an extremely bloody, violent fight. It's going to be an old-school UFC fight. This is a fight that the fans want to see because of these 2 styles. And on top of that, you got Matt Brown contemplating retirement. So if that indeed is the truth, right, and this indeed will be his last fight, think about his mindset, his state of mind. He is going to want to go all out and put on a performance that will be remembered. throughout the history of the UFC. So this is what's going to make this fight so exciting. Now, in terms of picking the winner, I do think that Matt Brown will win this fight. I think he looked better in his last fight. He looked really good against Cerrone. Hurt him a couple times before Cerrone landed that mean high kick that he always tries to set up and knocked TKO'd Matt Brown in the 3rd round, I believe it was. Now, Sanchez is coming off a brutal knockout loss to Aoi Akinta back in the 155-pound division. Now, like I said, Matt Brown looked better in his last fight. I think at this point, he's a bit more durable than Diego Sanchez. And I think his overall striking is just a tad better than Diego. But nevertheless, it's going to be a good fight. Close, competitive. I think it's going to go down to the wire. It's going to go down to the judges' hands. And I think they're going to award Matt Brown. And I'm picking Matt Brown to win this fight via split decision in a very, very close fight. And now we move on to the main event of the evening. We got a lightweight bout between the number 8 ranked lightweight in the world, Dustin the Diamond Poirier, and the 13th ranked lightweight in the world and former lightweight champion in Anthony Showtime Pettis. Now, Dustin Poirier, his boxing skills are really good, and he also has power in his punches. Now, he's a brown belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's getting better on the mat, and his grappling is pretty good. His wrestling is pretty good. Although he's not an offensive wrestler, if need be, he can get his opponent to the ground. He is more than capable of being able to out-wrestle an opponent, obviously depending on how experienced the opponent or how good the opponent is at wrestling, but his wrestling is pretty good. So I'd say, and I think most people would agree, that Dustin Poirier is a pretty well-rounded fighter. Now, the only knock I have on Poirier is the fact that he does not have the strongest of chins. Now, he previously competed in the 145-pound division. We all know he was knocked out by Conor McGregor. Before he moved up to the lightweight division, he was on a 3-fight winning streak. 2 of those wins, he knocked out his opponent in the 1st round before being matched up by Michael Johnson. As we all know, Michael Johnson is one of the best boxers in the lightweight division, and he is arguably the hardest puncher in that division as well. And in that fight, Poirier got clipped up. He got knocked out stiff in the 1st round by Michael Johnson. Now, you may say, wait a minute, those 2 guys are hard hitters, so if you get knocked out by those guys, there's no shame. And you're right, those 2 fights don't justify the fact that I'm saying that he doesn't have a chin. Now, what does is his last fight at UFC 211 against Eddie Alvarez. He hurt Alvarez badly in the 2nd round. It looked as if he was going to put him away. Alvarez was eating punches over and over again. And then Eddie Alvarez just swung. He swung for the fences, and he connected to the chin of Poirier. And then Poirier was wobbled. So, I mean, he got wobbled by an opponent that was badly hurt and really wasn't packing much power in his punches because he was so wobbled and so stunned. Now, we all know how that fight ended. It was a no contest because Eddie Alvarez landed a couple of illegal knees, and because of that, it resulted in a no contest. Now, a win over Eddie Alvarez certainly would have ranked Dustin Poirier inside the top 5 and pushed him closer to title contention. But as we all know, that didn't happen. Instead, he's getting a main event slot on a UFC Fight Night card against the former champion in Anthony Showtime Pettis. Now, Pettis, you know, was the champion at the 155-pound division, or in the 155-pound division, before he lost his belt to Raphael dos Anjos. Now, Pettis had beaten guys like Donald Cerrone. He dethroned Benson Henderson, who is one of the greatest lightweights of all time. You know, so he had definitely beaten some of the best lightweights in the world before eventually losing 3 straight. He lost his belt to Raphael dos Anjos. He lost to Eddie Alvarez, and I believe he also lost to Edson Barbosa. Now, albeit those 3 guys, right, 2 of them are former champions, and one of them in Edson Barbosa is one of the best lightweights in the world. So really, he didn't. It's not like he lost to scrubs, but the fact that he lost to these top contenders really made him question whether or not he still had what it took to fight the best in that division. So as a result, he moved down. He won his UFC debut against Charles Oliveira, and then he was awarded an interim title shot for the vacant featherweight belt against Max Holloway. In that fight, he was finished. Max Holloway landed a clean body kick, hurt Pettis badly, and that was the first time ever that Anthony Pettis was finished by strikes. And with all that being said, he didn't look the best at 145 pounds. He's even said it himself that that weight cut is extremely hard for him. I mean, you could tell just by his physical appearance that it was taking a lot out of him. So after that loss to Max Holloway, he moved back up and he fought Jim Miller. And in that fight, he looked very comfortable, light on his feet. You know, he was throwing spinning kicks. He was attacking the body, attacking the leg, throwing different combinations. At one point, the fight was even taken to the ground. And he looked very comfortable. He looked like himself. He looked like he was beginning to gain some of that confidence back that he once possessed, you know, early on in his career. Now, even though Pettis has lost 2 of his last 6 fights, it doesn't change the fact that Pettis is one of the most complete lightweights in the world. His grappling is really good. His jiu-jitsu is underrated, especially off of his back. His striking is phenomenal. I mean, this guy's a 3rd-degree black belt in Taekwondo. He has so many weapons in the striking game that it's not even funny. And I think that in this fight with Dustin Poirier, right, I think it's going to stay standing up for almost the entirety of the fight. You know, Poirier is going to try to use some of that classic boxing that we see him. You know, he likes to use the jab. He likes to set up the power punches like the hooks, right, the uppercuts. And he has power in his hands. And his hand speed is pretty good. Now, the only thing I would say is that Dustin Poirier has not faced a fighter this well-rounded. Or I should say a fighter with this many tools, right? Capable of being able to finish the fight with a variety of different strikes, a variety of different techniques. Because Anthony Pettis, right, likes to use his elbows. He likes to use punches. He likes to use kicks, right, to the body, to the leg. And he also likes to use knees, especially in the clinch. He has a mean clinch game. So he definitely is the way better striker than Dustin Poirier. But Poirier is going to have an opportunity because he has power. Because if he lands one on Pettis, it can hurt him. And I think that he's going to try to use the jab. He's going to try to move in and out, right? He's going to try to outbox Anthony Pettis, and he may very well do so. But like I said earlier, he doesn't have the best of chins, and he has a tendency to leave himself open. You know, he gets in these exchanges like we saw with Conor McGregor, like we saw with Michael Johnson, and he leaves himself vulnerable. He leaves himself open. And what happens is he gets caught, and I think that the same thing is going to happen in this fight. I think he'll get hurt a couple times. I think he's going to try to press the action at certain times in this fight, and Pettis is going to counter him. He's going to counter him with some body shots, you know, body kicks, counter punches, and things like that. And I see him hurting Dustin Poirier a few times in this fight, being close to putting him away, but Poirier's tough, and he has heart. I don't think that Pettis will get the finish, but I do see him hurting him a few times in this fight. I think it's going to go the distance. I think it's going to be an entertaining fight, but I do see Anthony Pettis winning this fight decisively, and I'm gonna have to pick Anthony Pettis to win this fight by unanimous decision. And a win over Poirier is definitely gonna boost his confidence, you know, because Poirier is so tough, because he's so good, and because he's ranked at number 8. So we're gonna see that what Anthony Pettis shows up for this fight, and if he indeed is back, because beating Jim Miller is not saying much, but a win over Dustin Poirier definitely will convince me that he's back and he's making a legitimate push for a title shot. But with that being said, I hope you guys enjoy these picks. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and let me know in the comments down below who you think is going to win. Not just in the main event, but the entire card. Let me know your picks down below in the comment section. But like I said, I hope you guys enjoyed, and make sure to stay tuned for more content.